Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network, everybody. This is Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. They are taking a mid-morning break now in the case out of Florida. This really interesting case from a legal perspective. It's the case of Laquan Barrow, Gary King, and Michael Smith. They're each charged with one count of second-degree murder for the death of 19-year-old Benetria Robinson in a 2015 nightclub shooting. Now, they're also charged, each of them, with different levels of second-degree murder. So Barrow and Smith are also charged with 5 counts of attempted second-degree murder, and King is charged only with 4 counts of attempted second-degree murder. I say only, but it's still 4 counts. What's interesting about this, though, this case is interesting for a number of levels. Number one, we have 3 defendants who are each being tried at the same time. They're each represented by separate counsel, so you keep seeing under cross-examination each one of their defense attorneys really hammering on those witnesses. And it should be also noted that Mr. King has a separate jury. Now, the reason he has a separate jury is kind of complicated. It goes into Florida law that he wanted a speedy trial. The bottom line is there are 2 juries there. There are 2 juries, so there's a lot of different complex issues with this case. But the really constant with all 3 defendants is that each one of them is saying they had nothing to do with this. We heard in opening arguments yesterday, each one of the defense attorneys say, you might hear witnesses say that they saw my client firing a weapon, but listen to our witnesses. Let's see what the videotape shows. Let's see what the video surveillance shows. Because in this case, remember, this was at a nightclub. You're going to see probably cell phone footage. You're going to probably see security camera footage. And that stuff, that kind of evidence is really strong in these cases. So it's either going to corroborate or contradict what other witnesses will say. And you know, right now they started the case. The prosecution has started their case. They're bringing in, you saw yesterday, a lot of police officers, first responders, the medical examiner testify. It's all important in a case like this. It establishes what happened. But then we're going to move on to the victims. Remember, there are 5 victims, well, I should say 6 victims in this case. Benetria Robinson died, unfortunately, but 5 other people were injured in this attack. And they're going to take the stand and say what they saw. Now, remember, this whole case, this whole event took place because of a fight. There was a fight within the nightclub that involved at least seemingly 2 of the victims, the Kendricks, Nathaniel Kendrick and Danielle Kendrick, and also involved Mr. Barrow as well as another associate of his. There was a fight that was inside the club between, I think, 2 women. It was brought outside. There was commotion. It was chaotic. And according to witnesses' testimony, which you will hear, they saw Barrow, King, and Smith firing guns into this crowd. Now, the level of who saw what, who fired the weapons, at what point did Mr. Barrow or King get the weapons or Mr. Smith get the weapons, that's going to be very interesting when we hear that testimony. So we are in the beginning stages of this. A lot of questions that we still are unanswered. And I think it's very interesting that we have these 3 defendants who neither one of them, as of yet, has pointed the finger at the other. They're saying not one of those 3 individuals has committed this crime. And what we saw today, even though it could be a little dry, I understand, we saw the testimony of Kathleen Schmidt. She was a forensic crime scene technician here. And really what you saw, great lawyering on the part of the defense attorneys, really saying, you can't tell us, we see these 2 bullet holes in the crime scene, but you don't know when they were formed. You don't know when they were shot. You don't even know the direction of the bullets. You don't even know if they came from the south, they came from the front of the club. They could have been there for months beforehand. And she said that's true. And she even admitted on the stand that she should have taken a photograph from the exit point of where that bullet might have come from, but she didn't. And that's a really key tactic in these kind of cases where defense attorneys hit on the procedures, the methods that are used by crime scene analysts and investigators, really trying to show they might not have done as thorough a job, or we really don't know what happened as of yet. So as we do take this mid-morning break, I do want to play for you testimony from yesterday from one of the first responders. This is his name is Detective Richard Tuck. Now I want you to picture this for a second. We heard a lot of first responders. This guy gets a call while about a shooting in a nightclub. And what is the first thing he does? He jumps in his police cruiser and drives right towards the Cloud9 nightclub and parks his car right in front. He was the one who performed CPR and for emergency services upon Benetria Robinson. Unfortunately, as I said, she passed away. So, but it's interesting to see his testimony, and that was also backed up by his dash cam footage. So we saw a lot of that yesterday, him reporting to the scene, the chaotic nature of it, and him trying to perform rescue services on this young woman. So I want to play for you his testimony, and when we come back, we'll have more analysis here on the Law and Crime Network.
And what is your current job title and duties?
I'm a District 2 property crimes detective, so I investigate auto burglaries, car thefts, arsons, stuff that's related to property crimes.
How long have you been a property crimes detective?
Since July.
Of this year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you had a different position in September of 2015, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What were you doing then?
I was a patrol officer.
Okay. And how long were you a patrol officer with OPD?
For about 2.5 years, give or take.
Any other positions with the Ocala Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
What else have you done with them?
I've been a detective in the Criminal Intelligence Unit for a little over a year, and I've been assigned to some various violent crimes task force.
So were you on duty on September 13th, the early morning hours of September 13th, 2015?
Yes, ma'am.
In your patrol capacity?
Yes, ma'am.
Where were you around 1:30 that morning?
Before the call came out, I was downtown on the square right over here. The bars were about to let out, so that's typically where we would kind of congregate and wait for the bar crowd to disperse.
Okay. Were you by yourself in your own patrol vehicle?
There were several other officers downtown, but I was by myself in my patrol car, yes, ma'am.
How many other units were downtown on the square along with you?
I don't know an exact number, but there was a couple. 2 or 3 maybe, I'm not quite sure.
As you mentioned previously, at some point in time a call comes out over the radio, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And had the bars let out in the square at this point in time?
I don't believe so. I don't recall, but I believe it was about just after 1 or just before 1. And typically the bars wouldn't let out until about 1:30, 1:45. Okay. So not quite.
At the point in time that the call came out, what was the nature of the dispatch?
An officer got over the radio and said that there were shots fired at Cloud9.
Okay. And what did you do in response to hearing that?
I ran in my patrol car.
Welcome back to the Law and Crime Network, everybody. This is Jesse Weber. I want to analyze what we've seen so far in this case from yesterday and from today. So joining us now is criminal defense attorney Jayne Weintraub. Jayne, good to have you here on the program.
My pleasure, Jesse.
So let's talk a little bit about this case. The interesting part about it is we have 3 defendants, each represented by their own attorney. Do you see any kind of conflict, or what is the relationship between the different attorneys working in this this case, where they're all on trial, they're all being tried at the same time, they're each saying they had nothing to do with it? I'm curious the relationship between the different defense teams here.
It's very difficult. I've been in that situation many, many times. The law is very clear that the defendants are not entitled to their own individual trials, and when they should be joined together, if it's the same evidence and the same crime, they're going to be tried together unless one gives a statement, for example, and it can't be used against the others. Or if one indicates or implicates one of the co-defendants, that won't come in as evidence. As a matter of fact, in this case, there is a separate jury for one of the co-defendants who filed a speedy trial demand. And I believe that that's for Gary King. However, you know, when you're talking about a relationship, I really don't know what the relationship is. Every case is different. I don't know if these lawyers know one another. If they're working together, I would assume they are, because they're not stepping on each other. They have a very similar defense, and it should be cogent. More important, though, I think, is what happened yesterday and what happened this morning. What's the evidence? What's going on here? And I think that we've seen already from the prosecutor, who was reading her opening statement yesterday, which was quite surprising, we saw a lot of talk about the victim's wounds, and the victim died. We know that, and they have a clean victim, and it's a shame and a tragedy. However, what's the evidence against the individuals that they're seeking to put in jail for life? And it seems to me, from what we've heard thus far, In the opening statement, the prosecutor said that they have some eyewitnesses that have inconsistent testimony. And eyewitness testimony, as you well know, is the least reliable evidence on earth. I mean, the typical example in Law School 101 in criminal law is, the professor has two people run across the room while he's talking, and then 10 different people describe in the class what they saw. And you have 8 different descriptions of what the person was wearing. What hands did they grab something in? What were they doing? Eyewitness ID is bad. You have a chaotic scene here. Many, many people in the crowd. They have put out 4 witnesses already to talk about forensics and trajectory. It's meaningless. None of them can talk about the identification of a shooter. We know that these people were shot. The question is, who did the shooting?
Well, I thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting today when they had this crime scene, an analyst come on, and the defense really hit into her and said, "You don't know when these bullet holes that you found, when they were formed. You don't even know what direction the bullets might have come from. So if you can't even pinpoint that, what's the usefulness of this testimony?" I thought that was good defense work on all 3 of them.
Yes, it was excellent, and the point is that the state they don't know where the defendants were. So if you don't know where the defendants were standing, what's the difference what the trajectory and what the angle was? Because it was all speculative. Every one of those questions could have been objection, speculation, sustained. And the problem here is, again, you have a large crowd where there's chaos. The police don't even respond till after. I mean, what I thought was also critical is that right before opening statement yesterday, which I watched again last night, was the prosecutor standing up saying one of the pivotal eyewitnesses recanted and changed his testimony, admitted he was on drugs that night, doesn't have 100% recall, and isn't comfortable testifying.
Don't you just see it, though? Don't you just see that you can just predict how much the defense is going to tear into so many of these witnesses? How much did you have to drink tonight? Are you sure you were able to see anything that you saw? I mean, wasn't it a crowded area? I mean, how much opportunity do they have when these witnesses take the stand to really delve into their condition and what was happening, the chaotic nature of that event?
They will be able to delve into it completely. Remember, in Florida, we have depositions. And in Florida, unlike any other state, the defense lawyers have had the opportunity to take a deposition, a sworn statement from every witness on the state's witness list. Because remember, in Florida, it's the same as in civil cases. And so these lawyers already know, and so does the prosecutor, exactly what every witness is going to say. None of this is a Perry Mason, gotcha moment. These are all very calculated and prepared questions that will be being asked. The big thing here also is motive. There were women having a fight inside, and they took the fight outside when they were thrown out. There's motive to testify against somebody. There are relationships here that are going to be examined by the defense.
Yeah,
I'm curious to see what the state has.
I am too. There's a lot of unanswered questions here. That's what it really is. Jayne, hold on one second. We actually do have a live feed back in the courtroom, so let's turn to it now, and we'll be back here with more analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.